Thanks for downloading a 3CR podcast. 3CR is an independent community radio station based in Melbourne, Australia. We need your financial support to keep going. Go to www.3cr.org.au for more information and to donate online. Now stay tuned for your 3CR podcast.
Sabah al-Khair, good morning dear listeners. You're listening to Radio 3CR on 855 AM and Palestine Remembered with Robert Martin, Nasser Mashni and Yusuf Ahmed al-Rimawi.
Palestine Remembered is Australia's only English language radio program that is totally dedicated to Palestine. We'd like to welcome those listening on 855 and those that will join us on podcast at 3cr.org.au.
Thanks for joining us. Stay with us and enjoy the episode.
Good morning, Nasser.
Good morning, Yusuf. How you doing?
So Robert is bringing us coffee again, so he won't be with us.
From Brazil. From
Brazil, yes, the best coffee. We are very excited to have a very special guest this week, Nasser.
A true Palestinian heroine and an exemplar to all Palestinians and their steadfastness.
So that will be Shireen Aisawi will talk to us about her experience in Israeli prison and her iconic...
even from how she got the taste for and desire for independence through to her time in jail, through to her work as a lawyer.
So that will be coming up next. But what else do we have?
We're going to speak about the Minister for Israel, Michael Danby, deciding not to run. Also some Palestinian villages. I mean, Israel is deciding to do some more ethnic cleansing. And just to touch on some of the working conditions for the Palestinians face within Israel.
Also, Nasser, we will pay tribute to Felicia Langer, who left us last week, the first advocate for Palestinian prisoners and the first person who took the Israeli prisoners to court. So without further delay, our interview next is with Shireen Aisawi from Al Aisawiya in Al-Quds. We are delighted and honored to have on the phone with us Shireen Aisawi. Shireen, thanks for being with us on the show.
Thank you, and I'm very honored to be with you today.
Shireen, before we start the interview, I would like to know more about yourself. You are a freed prisoner. You are a human rights advocate. You are an advocate for Palestinian prisoners. And also tell me about your family. You have brothers in prisons. One of your brothers is a shaheed. You came from an iconic resistance family in Aisawiya, Jerusalem. Tell me more about that.
I have to tell you first about my grandfather, Ahmed Aisawi. He was one of the founders of the PLO and was the commander of the rebel army north of Jerusalem. He resisted the British mandate and then the Israeli occupation. He was always telling us about the revolution and the revolutionaries. We grew up listening to his stories about the revolution. He was telling us about my uncle Osama. He was killed by an Israeli army in north of Palestine in 1982. And he crossed the borders with a group of Fidaiyin revolutionaries and attacked an Israeli army, so he was killed then. My other uncle Hani, he was in Israeli jails for 12 years in administrative detention. In the 70s, also my parents were arrested by an Israeli soldiers. When the first Intifada began, my brothers started to involve in the Intifada, so they were arrested also. My brother Mithat was 12 years old when he first arrested. He spent almost 1 year in an Israeli jail. Since then till now, he spent almost 23 years in Israeli jails. His daughter Layla, she's now 5 years old. Most of the time they didn't allow her to visit him. And as I said, most of my brothers, or all of my brothers, were in Israeli jails. Rafat was in prison for 5 years, Shadi for 9 years, Samer now 16 years in Israeli prisons. They were and they are fighting for our freedom, but the Israeli occupation considered them as terrorists, so they put them in jails. I spent 5 years also in Israeli jails. My brother Fadi was 16 years old when he was killed by an Israeli soldiers, and it was 2 months after he released from the jail, after spending 1 year for throwing stones toward the soldiers. I decided to study law so I can fight for these prisoners, for the Palestinians who can't fight for their freedom, to be their voice in the whole world, to express ourselves as fighters for our freedom. But the Israeli occupation didn't like that, so they put me in a prison. But we are strong enough to continue our fight till we have our freedom and till all the refugees, the Palestinian refugees, return to Palestine, free Palestine.
So Shireen, can you just take us through the process of arrest? You know, what happens when you're first arrested before you get to prison? What are the Israeli tactics and techniques that they use during your interrogation?
During the interrogation, the rules of international law regarding to the prohibition of torture, whether physical or psychological, are not respected by the Israeli occupation. And there are many examples that can be said of detainees, Palestinian detainees, who was killed as a result of torture. For me, I was subjected to a physical and psychological torture, where I was beaten violently, and for example, they forced me to sit in a small chair for 20 hours on 30 days while they chained my hands and my arms to that chair. They beating me, they didn't allow me to sleep, they even didn't allow me to have a bath. 2 months in this situation without seeing anyone. Sometimes they use the detainees as a human shield. For example, my brother Samer, when they arrest him, they used him as a human shield, and he was also subjected to a several torture. My brother Midhat also was subjected to that kind of torture. They broke his nose and his teeth. They forced him to stand without any clothes at all on the snow in the winter. There are so many methods that the Israeli soldiers or the Israeli occupation used during the interrogation to force the Palestinians to give any information at all that they know. For us as Palestinians, we see all these methods that they want to break our souls. They want to break our believing in freedom. So they use their methods.
Shireen, you're talking about the period before conviction. Tell us about the disparity between what the international law says when it comes to the rights of people under interrogation versus what is actually happening in Israel.
First of all, by the international humanitarian law, when the occupation forces arrested anyone, they have to inform his family and also inform the person who was arrested of the charges that they are arresting him. They have also to inform the family where they kept this person as a detainee. 99% of the Palestinians detainees, when they arrested them, they didn't inform their families where they kept them, in which prison, which area. They didn't also inform the lawyers. They didn't give them any of their rights at all. And the interrogation itself have to be in specific hours. It shouldn't be in a long time. They have to give him some time to rest, to have food, to pray. Also the international humanitarian law forced these forces, the occupation forces, to give the person clean clothes and to allow him to have a bath. All these things the Israeli occupation didn't respect at all. They kept the Palestinian detainees without any rights during the interrogation. They didn't allow them to have a bath. They spent the whole time, 2 or 3 months, in the same clothes. They didn't give them any food, or in some cases, as happened with me, I was chained to the chair most of the time, and they put the food in front of me, and they told me to have this food, to eat this food, but my hands are chained, so there's no way that I can eat any food. And also they have to give the Palestinian detainees a medical treatment during the interrogation and after the interrogation, but they didn't give us any kind of medical treatment at all. And also by the international humanitarian law, they have to give us hours to sleep. It's our right to have a good sleep at least 8 hours, but they didn't respect that. As you can see, we are talking about the Israeli occupation. This occupation is using the apartheid rules against the Palestinians, so we didn't expect from them to respect our rights as human beings. So the human rights centers in the world, the international human rights centers, have to do something to stop these violations against the Palestinians, especially the detainees who are sick and during the interrogation. And of course, not forgetting the torture. And the international law put an obligation on the occupation forces to respect the human rights and not to torture the detainees, but as we say, they didn't respect that at all. Noticing that we are talking about children, about women, not just adult persons. When they arrest a child who is 12 or 13 years old and put him in this situation of torture, what a humanity we are talking about of this occupation. Can you imagine a child on this age sitting alone and is being tortured by the Israeli occupation without any charges, just because he's a Palestinian?
Listeners, we are speaking to Shireen Isawi, a fabulous Palestinian woman from Palestine. Shireen, before we move on, in a normal Western democracy, when somebody's arrested, they get a phone call and the opportunity to speak to legal representation. How long does it take for a Palestinian to get to see their lawyer?
Most of the time, they didn't allow them to see the lawyer till 14 days. But most of the cases are after 30 days, after 1 month, and sometimes it will be after 90 days, 3 months. Noticing that the Palestinian detainee didn't know the charges against him. So even when he saw the lawyer, he didn't know what to consult with the lawyer because he didn't know the charges. And sometimes in the trial itself, the trial is a secret one. So the lawyer, if they allow the lawyer to be in the trial, or the detainee, they didn't know why they arresting him. After 3 months, he will know the charges in the end of the interrogation.
Shireen, let's say a Jewish Israeli commits a crime. Do he or she go through the same avenues of legal process? And my other part of the question, tell me about the rate of conviction for Palestinians in Israeli courts.
There are 2 types of courts. The first is the military court, where every Palestinian being arrested in the West Bank, they are bring him to this kind of courts. And the other is a criminal one. For those who are arrested in Jerusalem, Gaza and occupied Palestine since 1948. There is no justice in these courts because the laws is not the same for the Palestinians and the Jewish. We can consider the courts as a democratic one for the Jewish people themselves, and the rate of the convention there is almost 50% or something like that. But for the Palestinians, it's almost 99%, and it's not the same laws. There's law for the Jewish and the military laws also for the Palestinians. It's not the same. Even the sentence for the crime, let's say, for the Palestinians it will be a life sentence, but for the Jewish it will be several months. And we can take an example for the soldier Azaria, who killed a Palestinian, an injured Palestinian, and they sentenced him for 9 months.
Shireen, can you take us on a journey on your time inside the Israeli jails? What was it like inside prison, your first night? Where was the prison? And under international law, were there breaches of conventions with respect to where you were imprisoned?
After I spent 30 days in a continuous interrogation and I was tortured, they transferred me to isolation section, and my family was prevented from visiting me for another 2 months. The prisons are usually located inside the occupied Palestine territories, and this is a violation of international humanitarian law, which requires the occupation state to detain prisoners in prisons and detention centers close to their places where they are living. And on the other hand, the prisons are very old, full of insects, and do not enter the sun or fresh air as it should be. The smell of the cell is very disgusting, and the cell itself is very small. They didn't give me, after 30 days, they didn't give me any clean clothes. And the food that they give me or give to another prisoners wasn't good enough to eat.
My understanding, Shireen, that you were in prison during the call for hunger strike last year. The prisoners, the massive hunger strike. Please describe the atmosphere inside and help us understand the demands of the prisoner movement. Why did the prisoners go on hunger strike, and what were they protesting against?
The demands of the prisoners were human demands, as the prison administration dealt with us in racism through the laws and the procedures, such as preventing the parents and from visiting them, and also preventing a second-degree family from visiting the prisoners. They just let the mother and father, also sister, brother, son, daughter, to visit some of the prisoners, not all of them. And there's prisoners had none of them. They have no one to visit them, such as a aunt and uncle. When the hunger strike began, I was in isolation, on a hunger strike to end my isolation. So during the general hunger strike of the other prisoners, the prison administration agreed to end my isolation and so to end my hunger strike. And I transferred to Damoun prison, but I remained in isolation there because I continued my hunger strike with the other prisoners. But the Palestinian prisoners, sent me a message with one of the lawyers to finish my hunger strike and return to the section in Damoun prison with the other girls. And also some of the demands were to allow them to call their families, especially those who are none of their families is allowed to visit them in the prison. Also, some of the demands were to provide treatment to the prisoners who are sick, that the Israeli occupation didn't treat them as they should be and let them die just like that in the prison. And there are other prisoners who have another humanitarian demands, and they succeed to achieve most of them, because we are talking about an Israeli occupation who didn't care about anyone who is Palestinian.
Shireen, just a couple more questions before we finish our interview. Firstly, can you give a sense to our listeners of your life as a Palestinian in Palestine under Israeli occupation, and a woman in Australia perhaps? And also, as we discussed earlier off the line, the Australian government has cut aid to the PA because of alleged payment of salaries of prisoner families. Have you got a message for the Australian government and for Australia?
When I think about it, there is so many things that I can talk about it, but maybe I can just tell you a little things, a simple things that are practiced by the people in general in the daily life, that we can't do it here in Palestine because we live under occupation. For example, go to school or university without the Israeli soldiers beat us, or close the roads and prevent us from reaching to our school or to our university. Sleep without preparing clothes in case the soldiers came at night to arrest one of us. And maybe you all saw yesterday how they beat the girls, the Bedouin girls, that the soldiers go and want to demolish their houses. We don't have any rights here in Palestine, in occupied Palestine, nothing. At least the Australian girl has a state that protects her and have her normal life. And when she gets sick, she can get treatment, education, work, as another girl in the world. But here in Palestine, we don't have any rights because the occupation treats us as a terrorist, and we are not a terrorist. We have the right to resist until we achieve our freedom. And this is by the international law and the UN resolutions. And we are not terrorists. And my letter to the government of Australia is to rethink its decision that serves the Israeli occupation, not the Palestinians, and to be pro-Palestine, because in that case they will be in the side of the justice, the international justice.
Shireen, it's been a real honor to have you on the show. We salute your resistance and the resistance of your family, the people of Asawiya, the people of Jerusalem, the people of Palestine. Thank you so much for being with us on the show.
Thank you so much for having me, and I hope that my message will get to all the people all around the world, and to support us as a Palestinian people who live under the occupation to get our freedom. It's our right to be free and live in a free Palestine.
And thanks again to Shireen Asawi, a fantastic Palestinian lawyer, human rights defender and advocate, and someone who truly walks tall for Palestine.
So, Nasser, what else do you have?
Well, very excitingly, the Minister for Israel, Michael Danby, has decided not to run for re-election. He's just announced during the week that he's going to retire at the next federal election. It didn't take Greg Sheridan, the Australian reporter, long to write a big article. He called him the Labour lion, and he says, "This lion will roar no more." Oh. It's really quite a love fest for Michael Danby and Greg Sheridan, the two ministers for Israel. One's the advocate for Israel and the other's the minister for Israel.
But also, he's not speaking on behalf of all Jews of Melbourne. No. I saw on my Facebook page today, some of them are actually cheering.
Well, they're very happy to see the back of him, that's for sure.
Yep.
One of the things that Michael Danby said, he was sure that he would get pre-selected and he would win again. In fact, the word we hear from inside the Labour Party is that they were sick of his Israel First policy, the fact that he wasn't representing his constituency or Australia first, but Israel first, and they wanted to see the back of him. Well, interestingly, in that article where Greg Sheridan lionises Michael Danby, he refers to a parliamentary letter and debate, where Michael Danby talked about the unreliability of the Chinese legal system with a 99.6% conviction rate, how unreliable it would be.
Let's guess who's worse than this.
Well, there's only one country worse than this and is ultra-reliable. It's Michael Danby's own Israel, as we heard from Shireen just a little while ago. So we're glad to see the back of this guy, and good riddance. And
so that's one thing we're not going to miss.
No.
Also, Nasser, I want to touch on Khan al-Ahmar.
Yeah, and
Khan
Abu
al-Ahmar
Nawar as well.
Is a Palestinian Bedouin village in Al-Quds territory, and it's not recognized by the occupation. And this village has been demolished over and over again, and the last of which was yesterday. I mean, a few days ago.
Yeah.
And we've seen how Australian bulldozers and Australian occupation forces brutally dragged the people of Khan al-Ahmar, literally dragged them.
Yeah, they dragged them.
And even one of them was a woman who wore hijab, and she was her hijab was pulled.
It was
and,
brutal.
It was brutal, and in front of all cameras.
Yeah, there's no because there's no impunity. Israel hasn't been made to pay for any of their illegal actions, any of the inhumane actions. I mean, they've killed 140 people since Land Day, March 30 this year. No outrage, no boycotts, no divestments, no sanctions. And here they are, thousands of years old Bedouin village inside the municipality of Jerusalem. Because they celebrate God on a different day, we've got to make way. And they're making way not for anything other than to build a Jewish-only settlement there. So,
soon pictures or footage from confrontations like this will be illegal. So even the pictures that we see will be deemed against the law.
I mean, this is what a wonderful democracy Israel is. Yeah. You can't film a soldier
violation.
It's a violation, or a police officer doing their civic duty in shooting, arresting, killing, maiming, arresting, brutalizing, bulldozing Palestinians. This is. You're tarnishing our image.
Basically showing Israel
in its real colors.
The real face. Also, I want to remember Felicia Langer, the Jewish, Israeli, and Holocaust survivor from a Holocaust survival family, who was the first person who took Israeli prisons to court and exposed the violations against Palestinian prisoners after the 67 wars. She wrote a book called In My Own Eyes that was translated to many languages, and in fact it was translated into Arabic, Bi Ummi Aini. This book made it to a series. Abu Dhabi Television in 1979 produced a series with Syrian actors, and that was the first footage that I saw of Palestine. I remember when I was young. Wow. So may Allah bless her soul and any spirit that fights for freedom, regardless of whether they are Palestinian or Israeli or anyone.
We should also say that Felicia, to the point, she became so disgusted with the apartheid system within Israel
did not live.
That she left.
Yeah.
She went back to Germany.
She passed away in Germany.
Yeah. She couldn't stay and live there. She went back to the country of the Holocaust that killed her family. She couldn't stay in Israel.
And finally, like we heard from or the interview with Shireen, looks like the pro-Israel lobby has convinced our government that the families of prisoners are terrorists, and therefore the government decided to end the aid for the PA. And
I mean, it's a long and tenuous bow. I mean, the reality is we've got close to 10,000, sometimes 7,000, but call it over 7,000, up to 10,000 Palestinians who are imprisoned by the state of Israel under military law. Many of them, the vast majority, unconvicted. Many of them under administrative detention where they have not even seen the charges. Rolling 6-month detentions. I mean, Shireen herself, her brother, almost 80
Samer,
days.
Midhat.
All of them, and the hunger strikes that
Rafat.
they've been on, without ever having seen a charge. I mean, it's only at death's door do the Israelis release these poor Palestinian kids and women. Whilst we've still got time, Yusuf, another thing, a report came out on the
Maybe
working...
in 1 minute?
In 1 minute, on the working conditions within Israel. Israel has one of the highest injury and death rates on construction sites. And in Israel, you're an 8 in 10 chance if you die on an Israeli construction site, there's an 80% chance that you're Palestinian. Because Well, I don't think there's very much money
the ratio
on
is 20% in population,
20%
but 80% in casualties.
And don't forget, listeners, to go see Taha with Amr Halehel from the 10th of July to the 14th of July at the Arts Centre in Melbourne. Tickets are on sale now.
I think with this we've come to the end to another edition of Palestine Remember. Thank you, Nasser.
Thanks, Yusuf.
And I want to thank Shireen again for taking the effort and time to speak to us. And until we meet next Saturday, this is Nasser, Robert and Yusuf wishing you the best of time and salam.